Boop. Recording. Oh my gosh. I got a little notification in the log that's like, frame drops detected 26% over the percent over the last 2 minutes, when my current one's like 61%. Hello. I do hope the audio is at least okay. Luckily, there's not much in terms of visuals as usual, because I know what I'm about in terms of frame drops. So I have been okay. If you saw my Twitter post, things are like right now because roommate is sick with the thing, and I have been being careful, but you know, there's only so much I can really do when I live in an apartment. So can only really cross my fingers at this point. But I'm still feeling pretty alright. Is that okay? The visual artist, all about. I wish it wasn't that way. Which is weird, because honestly, at the start, like the first few streams I ever did, there was like little to no issues. And then just one day, the internet was like, you know what? I want to drop all these frames. Which was disappointing. Probably doesn't help that I am like wireless, like I'm on the wireless internet, but there's not really a way to get like the router or whatever. It just wouldn't be comfortable. One day, maybe. One day. Yeah. In fact, I was doing Wi-Fi on this first few that didn't drop very many. So I guess our Wi-Fi just decided to cut out. Yeah, I was trying to look around my room and see, like, maybe it might be worth it to see if I could put a router in here, but I don't think I have, like, that phone jack thing that they need. So, But yeah, so. Shrug. One day. Might get better internet, and then. Because I'd love to actually play more Steam games, but I'm not doing a game stream when there's this many dropped frames. That's just, it's too much. Well, should be getting started in a little bit here. I do actually have a few images set up. I tried something different this time, but again, it's nothing that's gonna move very much. It's like still images, so the drop frames shouldn't interfere with stuff too much. So ta-da! Yes, some images. Like this one. So, as you probably guessed and saw from the announcement, we're going to be talking about Octopath Traveler today, because I finished the comics, I think 2 months ago now? Last month? I actually don't even remember. I do a lot of my stuff ahead of time, so like right now, I did already announce the next month is Xenoblade 2, so I've been working on those. So right now my head is in Xenoblade 2 mode, and quote-unquote last month was Paper Mario, but yeah, so since those comics are over, I thought it'd be fun to do another one of these discussion streams, but on Octopath Traveler this time. And I'm going to start with... Well, actually, I'm going to start by saying that there are going to be spoilers, okay? I am going to try to not, like, spoil as much as possible, but there's definitely if you guys saw my comics, there is definitely one thing near the end of the game that I do want to talk about. Saying it nicely. And it's one of those things that I can't, like, not avoid while talking about it. So, but everything else I am going to try to not spoil stuff. It's just this one thing for sure that it's like, I have to specifically mention some spoilery things, so just keep that in mind, because, you know, I don't want to spoil anything too much for somebody that doesn't want it. So if you're worried about that, you can hop out, maybe watch it later, I don't know. But again, I will be vague. But the first question, because I'm going to start with the questions people asked, is from my patron Discord. Charles asked, who is the hottest Octopath? And my answer to that is Primrose. She's very pretty. And she also started off in the desert. So, like, in the other sense of the word, she's the hottest. Akasan says, all I know about Octopath is that it's weirdly developed that feels like separate stories with tacked-on party system, some awkward Middle English thou grammatical agreement, and from your comics, the final boss gauntlet sucks. Yes, there's the thing I was talking about. Yeah, we're gonna get there. Don't worry. And actually, a few of those other things are gonna be touched upon here too. But yes, Primrose, prettiest. Next question from Sugar on the Patreon server was, which story was your favorite? And my favorite story was Alf's. For a lot of different reasons. I liked his character a lot. I actually really like kind characters, especially when they're written by people that understand what makes a kind character interesting. Because I find in a lot of media, they like the people writing, it almost feels like they also think that, you know, cliche thing of, oh, the kind character is boring. And sometimes you can see that in the writing, and it's like, no, kind characters they can be really interesting, but if you're writing them with that opinion in mind, you're gonna write them boring. But Alf is not like that. He's really interesting. He's such a sweetie. And like his story too plays into that kindness. So like seeing that so well done with like a just really lovable character, just absolutely my favorite by a wide margin. Like, he says shucks all the time, and I'm like, oh, shucks. Also from Sugar on the patron Discord, which job class was your favorite? So for regular jobs, I would have to say the scholar job. And my main reason for that is that I really like mages in games a lot, and I love AoE attacks, and the scholar does that. Like, the 6 moves that you have are fire, lightning, and ice, and then fire, lightning, and ice that hits 3 times. And all of those are AoE. Okay, and then there's one other one that is a non-elemental attack that's seeing the life bar of the enemy, and one of the weaknesses, which I'll get into later. But for the most part, the Scholar has a bunch of elemental attacks that hits everybody, often for really good damage. So, like, I loved that. I loved, like, boosting stuff and then going, like, ha! Just annihilating everything. And then there are some extra jobs in the game, which are, I guess, kind of, like, a little spoilery, because they're optional. From those ones, I like the one called War Master, which makes you a physical powerhouse. Like, you can do 40,000 damage with, like, regular attacks. It's amazing. And then Rune Lord, which was really fun once I tried it out. I didn't really, like, understand it at first, but then I kind of got how it worked. Because you can give other party members, like, your stat boosts and such, including one it's called Sidestep, which lets you automatically avoid any physical move. Like, magic and stuff could still hit you, so there's the risk there. But if you're fighting something that uses a lot of physical moves, you can give your party members that. Like, usually it's just the one person, but you can make everybody avoid stuff, and it's so clutch. And you can stack it. It's amazing. So just seeing everybody be like, you can't hit me. Next question, also from Sugar on the Patreon Discord, is favorite song. So I have a couple answers for this one. The more typical one that really stood out to me while playing the game was the boss battle theme, which is probably a really popular one. But anytime you fought a boss, you'd always just be humming along with it. Me and my roomie were. And then one I grew an appreciation for was all of the Frostlands OSTs, because I found a compilation of them that I put on repeat that's really like super calming. In fact, I was going to try to have it as background music for this, but, you know, frames drop. Anything that could possibly interfere with that, I just don't want to have there. So, also possible copyright, I don't know. But it's called Octopath Traveler, The Frostlands Perfect Mix Extended. I definitely recommend looking that up. Oh, which boss theme? I just looked up boss theme on YouTube, and it was like one of the first ones, so that one. The more basic one, I guess? I would hum it, but I'm shy. Yeah, and a question from Gaku, who is here. I see you. Favorite and least favorite boss. So my favorite boss, just in terms of like gut feeling here, is probably the dragon from Haanit's story. I really liked all the bosses, honestly. But as you can see from the comic here, the dragon one, which I don't know how the dropped frames will be with looking at it, but basically, I had a really clutch move where Haanit and Primrose were blown away, and then Ophelia came back only to be killed, and Tressa literally had 1 HP, but I had sidestepped earlier, so I was able to survive. Like, both me and my roomie were like, oh my god! So that was a pretty hype moment, I suppose I'd say. Oh, and then least favorite boss. I'll get to this. Just you wait. God. Okay. Another question from Gaku was total number of Cait Casualties, which is like, if you guys know metal slimes and such, it's kind of like that, where if you kill it, you get a lot of EXP. I think it looks like this. This is the chunky one. I liked the chunky one. I think I only managed to kill one. Like, we didn't really go hunting for them very much. We saw a few, but I think I only got to actually kill. It's a chunky cat. It's a chunky cat with a lot of money. But yeah, I think I only managed to kill one because we didn't really see very many of them, and they ran, of course. So, the last patron Discord server question was from Charles, which was, other than the final dungeon, what was your biggest gripe with the game? Do I have a picture for this one? Oh yeah, I do. Okay. And this is one that you'll probably see a lot around, is my biggest quote-unquote complaint, if you can call it that, or a gripe, is the missed potential with the party members interacting more. Me and my roommate have talked about this for, like, a lot. Like, we really love this cast, and the travel banter is really great, and, like, we wanted more, but the game didn't really give you more. And honestly, as much as I loved the travel banter, it was really situational. Like, I think the first one that I got was pretty far into the game. Like, I didn't even know they existed until, like, pretty far into our sessions, and I'm just like, what is this? And my roommate was like, oh, just hit the button, they're gonna talk. And I was like, what, this exists? Like, so, like, having the interactions be, because you have to have, in each chapter, the way it works is during specific story beats, you have to have like that person in your party when that happens, and then the travel banter like happens, right? And again, I loved those, but like say you were doing Ophelia's third chapter, and I'm not going to say anything specific, but like say the first event that happens in that story, there's travel banter, and you have to have Primrose in the party for her to have that conversation pop up, but you didn't. And then you get into the next event, and the events come pretty fast in these chapters. When you get to that next event, that talk with Primrose is gone. You can't view it anymore. So like if you just didn't have her in your party for that very specific moment, like event number 1 of 16 of that chapter, you can't see that conversation anymore. Like you just the window of opportunity is so small. And I don't know about other people, but I switched around my parties pretty often to keep things like pretty equal across the board. But like there were so many, and they're great, but they're so easy to miss. And it's like that doesn't really feel like, I'll probably go into it a little bit more with like general story talk, but it just didn't really fill my want for interaction enough. And like I'm all for optional dialogue, but as you'll hear later on the general story stuff, they don't interact at all in their main stories at all. So like having their only interactions together be very optional and very tight windows is a baffling choice. Like it's a choice. It's very much a choice that they did that. Like when I say that they don't interact in their stories, they don't interact in their stories at all. Like it's as if they don't exist. But we'll get there. So next we're moving on to a Twitter question. This was from Tomato. They say, God knows the Galdera fight blows, but how do you feel about the lore surrounding it and all the other bosses? So in the last dungeon, which a lot of people call a bonus dungeon, I'm just going to call it the last dungeon for reasons I'll get into later. There's like a boss rush, and after all the bosses, there's little, or I say little, that is a lie. There are giant text blurbs that are like journal entries that really, they fill in the holes of some of the stuff that was like kind of leaned into in the other stories, and like it gives you the answers, right? And I did love that. That was really cool to see all that stuff. A little disappointing that it was in giant text blurbs and they were kind of like all one after the other. So you had to like, you fought a boss and you were like high on adrenaline and you were reading this thing, and it was interesting stuff, don't get me wrong, but like it was long. It was long, and you're sitting there just reading this giant paragraph of things, so you're like, okay, and then like when you get the second boss finished and you're like, oh man, another giant block of text, and you realize there's 8 things total, you're like, oh my god, I have 6 more like books to read. And also like, I don't know, 1 or 2 could have been a cutscene or something, but I did like how everything connected all together. And then the last question, which was from Tumblr, and Kingu Carp, was, so now that you've beaten Octopath, what did you think of the story overall? I noticed a lot of the negative discussions surrounding it focus on the lack of character interactivity, but it seems like very few people actually talk about the quality of the 8 stories. And I do have a little, I ranked each one of the stories, well, sort of ranked them like individually later on in my notes, so I will talk about them individually. But I do kind of want to talk, like you even heard me right now talking about the lack of interactivity myself. Like I focused on that too. And I think there is a reason that that's focused on. And that's kind of shown on the screen right now. a lot of the art and a lot of the advertising and a lot of the game itself and a lot of the fan art and a lot of everything surrounding this game is about these 8 characters together in some fashion. There's art of them like hanging out under like around a campfire. There's art of them in the tavern. There's the art of them here on top of the art of the map. Like the entire game, you have little conga lines. Like you always see them. They're always side by side. But it's one of those situations where I think the gameplay, presentation, and advertising, all those things, point to a party that interacts, and then the story has almost none of that. And that, as I mentioned before, is baffling. Like you have these great characters that do have chemistry and are interesting together, and you just put all of the interactions into optional conversations that have tiny windows to see them. And I've seen stuff that, like one video I think I saw once, where they pointed out something like, oh, I actually really liked that the characters didn't really interact or be in a party or something, because it felt like a D&D campaign where they were just happening upon each other and helping each other out while doing their own thing. And I respect that, and it is an interesting view that I had never thought about before, but it's one I really can't lean into because of everything I said before. Like the art, the gameplay itself, because they're walking around with each other for a majority of your gameplay. Like the fights, the world map stuff, the only time that they aren't like all together is the cutscenes, which among your entire game is going to be a very small portion. So the small portion where they're alone and not interacting is outweighed by everything else that you're doing. So that small portion feels really weird. But just to answer King Newcarp's question, I will go more specifically over those individual stories because it's not too bad. And it's going pretty good, Chaos. So I actually split my opinions on the stories, the 8 stories, into the girls group and the boys group, because while overall I do have a favorite and a least favorite, the middle ground I'm not too completely sure about, except like in the boys and girls groups. Like I find it easier to quantify those, if that makes any sense. So starting with the girls. Oh, wait, did I not? Oh, right, because I ordered this differently. Where is she? I liked Primrose's the best. I thought hers was the tightest out of all of the girls' stories, because I think Aquason mentioned it earlier. The game is a little bit weird on like its tone, and like the old-timey English speak is very interesting, but I kind of almost feel like it's a bit too much sometimes. And I think a good chunk of the stories have a lot of moments where it seems like way too serious, and that tone of voice and accents really leans it into almost melodramatic. Like I feel like I'm watching a soap opera sometimes, except Primrose's, I think hers did the best in being a serious story that didn't teeter into that. Like she did have the typical revenge plot and such, but she was like so straightforward about it, that it didn't lean into that like monologue, soap opera feeling. It was just like, these guys killed my father, I'm gonna go find them. I don't care, I have to step on to get it, I'm gonna do this. Like, like it just felt like it was better written, I think. Like, just tighter in the goal that it wanted to achieve. And I think hers fit really well with the 4-chapter, like, progress. Because the first chapter, she had to, like, find the guys, and then there was, like, 3 of them. So then each chapter was her finding one of the other guys. You know, like, it fit well with that structure. The next girl that I liked in terms of story was Ophelia, and she was actually the one that I started with. Hers was overall really good. I did like that it touched on, like, family grief and, like, what family means, because she wasn't a blood family member to her sister Liana, but, like, by all accounts they were family, right? Hers does suffer a little bit from the very beginning. She makes this, like, super rash choice, and it's one of the first comics I did, and it is, like, the first thing she does in her chapter. Like, me and my roommate were just like, what are you doing? Like, that's a pretty, like, big decision to just make after 5 minutes of, like, oh man, oh no, I'm grieving about or rather her sister was grieving more about her dad, like, yeah. And then Ophelia was like, I will do the thing, and just did not talk to anybody about it, like, I don't know. And then the end kind of had this common trope that I'm like, oh, which again my comics touched upon, and, like, is nothing awful, it's just that specific trope for me is like, oh man, here we go again, you know. But, like, it wasn't done badly, like, do not get that wrong, it was done well, it just for me was not my tastes. Third in line for the girls was Haanit's story. It was another good story, but I just didn't find it as compelling. Oh, hello! Some dude with sandals. Only just joined in, just wondering, did you answer any question about your favorite jobs? I did earlier. I'll finish this little bit about Haanit's story, and then I'll just go over that again. But yeah, so Haanit's story, hers suffered a little bit in terms of me liking it, because she had, like, extra old-timey accent speech, which really took me out of it. Like, especially because me and my roomie, we like to, like, or at least I do, we like to read non-spoken dialogue aloud. Like, it's just fun, and I'm not good at reading that, so I'd just be like, it's oh god. Like, so it kept taking me out of it because I couldn't read what was happening. She is cool, do not get me wrong, and her story does work. But I don't know, it was just like, it was almost too simple, if that makes any sense. Oh, and apparently I looked up what I was thinking of. Letting my arrow fly and true, the correct Middle English grammatical construction would be something like, let mine arrow fly and true. Sprinkle silent E endings for flavor, like, let mine arrow fly and true. Yeah, like, yeah. I don't know, it was just like, and it was funny because it felt like she was the only one that spoke like that. Like, everyone had that, like, sort of accent, and then she just really had it, which I know, I guess, was supposed to be like, oh, she lives in the woods and, like, is really close with animals and stuff. But I don't know, it didn't really fit for me. Anyway, so just going back to the jobs things real quick here for some dude with sandals. My favorite job, regular, was Scholar. I really like AoE attacks and elementals and such like that. And then for the extra jobs, I really liked War Master and Rune Lord for the physical damage output, and then just the fun of buffing you and your party members. Okay, oh, so the last story for the girls, and this is also definitely by far my least favorite story of them all. Not bad, but it's Tressa's. And you can actually see, this was just literally a comic. It was only 2 panels, but this just kind of sums up my issues with Tressa's storyline. She's like, yay, I helped this thing, but a lot of it feels very not thought out. Which would be fine because she's supposed to be the youngest in the group and she's charming and I like her, but because there's no interactivity with the party members, no one's there to call her out on this stuff. So like when she does these things and me and my roommate are just sitting here like, you're gonna ruin this town's economy by doing this, you realize? Like, and no one says anything about it. Because, to just put it vaguely, one of the chapters, I think the second one, so not too late in the story, she gets to a town, and there's, like, this... I'm gonna be vague here, just to still not spoil too much. She gets to a town, there's this, like, economy system here, where the people mine... they work as miners, basically for this noble, getting materials. He gives them money, and then he sells the materials for a profit later. Okay, and Tressa's mad because... No, I said that, Tree. I said that. She's young, and I get that. But the fact that no one is pointing out these things, that's my issue. If people were pointing these things out, like if people were being like, hey, Tressa, you should think about this a little bit more, like if there were the adults in the party leading her forward, that would be fantastic. I love stuff like that. I love when there's these things, but there's none of that. The girl walks into a town, ruins an economy, and the story's like, pat her on the back. Like I said, she goes in, this guy is paying, because it's his property is the thing I was mentioning in this chapter. This noble owns the land that these people are living on, and he's paying them, like, hey, can you mine this stuff for me? Here's the money. And then he sells it to people that want this stuff for more money. And it's treated like, oh my gosh, he's selling the things that the people worked hard for a profit. And I'm like, he's the one that has the connections and the knowledge of who wants these things. These are regular people that don't know any of this stuff. They're not nobles. They can't travel. They don't have the connections. They can't find these people that want these things. They're not merchants that know how to sell like you do, Tressa. They don't travel. They probably can't even fight. He's just paying them to do work. And, like, yeah, he turns out to be a jerk later, but she didn't know that at the beginning. And then he's taken care of, quote unquote, and my entire question is, what are these people doing for money now? This was their entire economy. This was how they were living, and it's just gone. Okay. Anyway, so that was that one, my least favorite. There's other things in her story too. Like, she gets hit hard with the lack of interactivity, because at the end, she's talking in front of people and talking about her adventure, and she's talking about the people that she met, but because of the way that the stories are written, that no one else can exist, these people that have literally been with her the entire time are not mentioned, and it just makes her look like a jerk. It's not her fault, because that's just the way they wrote it, but it's so funny to see her mention these, like, nobodies that I barely remember their names of, because of the way that the chapters, like, you can do them in any order you want, but I feel like most people aren't gonna go, okay, let's go chapter 1 to 4 for this one character, because the levels really bump up, so, like, if you want to have a decent time actually playing the game, you're gonna spread out your chapters, and you're not gonna remember these people very well. Like, you'll see the name and be like, oh, yeah, that guy. But the fact that, you know, Alf, Ophelia, Primrose, the people that have been traveling with Tressa and fighting alongside her are not mentioned at all. It just feels mean. Anyway, well, we're done with Tressa's thing. I'm harping on it too much. On to the boys now. My favorite of the boys, and definitely my favorite of all the stories, is elves. Big shocker there, but I already mentioned it. I really love his character, and I really loved the fact that his story leaned in to that like kindness, because like he's a healer and stuff, and the conflicts in his story were like challenging that kindness, you know. So, but like he stays steadfast in being nice. Like I just guessing he's the one in the front. Alf. Oh, I'm pointing with my mouse. He's the one with the pink background over here. An official artwork. I think that might be Olberic. But yeah, I just... Oh, also the fact that all of the other stories are kind of very serious business, like dark conspiracies, thievery, death and revenge, and, you know, all this stuff. And, like, Alf does have that, but he's a lot, like, it feels a lot lighter, which is really nice. Which, like I said, there's, like, soap opera type feelings, so having one that's just, like, he still has conflicts, but he's just like, I am a nice person. It's really good. And he says, shucks. I love the shucks. I'll answer. Some dude with sandals says, do you have any favorite side characters? And I assume Zeph is one of them. Yes, love my boy Zeph. Unofficial 9th member. He was just really nice. I feel like, the blonde-haired pirate from Tressa's Leon, I feel like he stuck with me pretty well too. And I think Simeon was a good character too. No spoilers, but he was entertaining. Next favorite story in terms of the boys is Cyrus's. Oh, Akasan says, how many hours did you play anyway? I think in the end, with all the main stories, doing a lot of the side bosses, many attempts in the final third, I think it came to, I want to say 118 hours, maybe? But yeah, we did all of the side quests, and yeah, we definitely got our money's worth. So for Cyrus's story, his was really high up for mine too, because I really liked that. I wish they'd done a bit more with it. It feels like they didn't quite do as much as I was expecting. But I liked it that there was a mystery aspect to it, and you had to like put together clues. I actually thought, and I think this was somebody else's. I think this was one of Olberic's chapters where there was like a Colosseum, and you were able to, what do you call it? You'd either talk with Alf or scrutinize with Cyrus, and you'd like learn like stats about the people in this Colosseum one. And me and my roommate, I think my roommate had just forgotten because she had played it before, but I didn't know. I thought that was going to be like crucial. Like you'd get into the Colosseum and it'd be like, oh, because we scrutinize everybody, we know their weaknesses and stuff now, and that's not how it worked. But I thought that's how it was going to work, and I was excited for that. And anyway, more about Cyrus. I really enjoyed that they made his character like, I don't know how to describe it, but a quote unquote player, but in the accidental sense, and it really worked. Where he's just this nice suave dude that just talks really eloquently, which makes the ladies go like, ooh, he's cool, and like, oh, I think he's interested, but like he's just kind of a moron that talks like that. And they think that he's flirting with them, but he's not. And you can like tell that he's just like, ooh, you know, like, oh, that is a fine dress you are wearing today. Oh, like he doesn't think of that. He's just being nice, like, I don't know. But and then the girls get mad at him like, well, you were flirting with me, but you weren't. And he's like, huh? Yeah, like I really liked that. That was a really fun way to kind of do like that typical angle, but not make it awful, for lack of a better word. I see the trope all the time, and I'm just like, here we go again. But Cyrus was just really a really fun take on that. And he's a sorcerer, which I love, and his ability to see a weakness of an enemy just by walking into the battle. Oh, just beautiful. Just, fantastic. Next in line for the boys was Therion, which this comic here, he would have ranked higher, but he suffers from something demonstrated in this, where he's like, how can you believe in other people? And she looks, and he's got 7 other people with him, and he's like, what are you talking about? Again, Therion might have been higher, like in the overall standings, maybe. He would have fought more with Cyrus, because I did really like Cyrus's in the first place, but Therion's would have been a lot stronger if not for that, the baffling choice of not addressing the party members. Because I like this whole, like, oh, he's a lone wolf, he can't trust people, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's a strong story isolated. But when you add in the fact that Aquasun asked, like, how many hours did I play? 118. I would say maybe 8 hours of that was cutscenes. 8 hours was the characters being alone. 110 hours is them being together. Trying to do a lone wolf story when there are 8 people, possibly up to 10 people total in your party, is like really hard to do when you're not addressing the fact that there are other people with him. Like, it's not even like a typical, like, 4-person party, because like with a 4-person party it's like, okay, I can see it, but there's 8 people. That's a big party. And like I said, with Ophelia's guide and Primrose's like allure, you could have up to 10 people in that party. And like I said, it would, without that, like, if in a vacuum, if it was just his game, it was really well done. I really liked it. Fantastic. But holy crap, that the fact that they don't interact really kills it, because if they did interact, you could show him being away from everyone else. You could show him as like, I'm just using these people to get my own gains, and he's like secretive from the others. He's not telling like what he's doing, like, you know what I mean? Like, you could actually play into that and still have his story work, because you'd be addressing this group of people that he's with, like maybe he keeps doing things on his own, and they're like, Therion, where did you go? And he's like, oh, I just got some apples for the party or something, or went to the tavern. Like, he's just lying to them. But like when he needs like horsepower and manpower to do something, then he's like, guys, come help me. And like, he's just very specifically using them until like maybe the end of the story. That would have worked, and it would have been fascinating. But that's not what happened. And Trey brings up a point that kind of was mentioned before of like, I imagine that they're all doing their own thing, and it's like a D&D thing. And I'm so conflicted with that, because on the one hand, yes. On the other hand, we could have done that anyway. Like, we could have had our cake and eat it too. Like, they could have interacted. One fun fact about Therion that I had asked my roommate about, I was like, do the party members know he's a thief? Like, are we just supposed to... Because I pointed it out in one of my early comics, but almost half of the stories out of the 8 start with the initial enemies being like thieves and bandits. So they're not on a good foot with thieves and bandits. Like, 3 of them at least are very strongly against it. Another one is a nun. Like, like they're generally good people, and Therion's kind of the more sketchy one alongside Primrose. So I was like, do they know he's a thief? I feel like a lot of them wouldn't want to help him if they knew he was a thief. Like, and my roommate was like, I don't know. I feel like maybe they must like he must have just lied to them or something. And as soon as we brought that up, I actually got a travel banter. And you know what the first thing that happened in that travel banter was? It was Olberic talking to Therion, and he said, "Hey Therion, as a thief, what is your opinion on breaking into a house?" And we were just like, what? Like, it just... Olberic, who was one of the people that didn't like thieves, just directly was like, "Hey, I know you're a thief. Tell me about your thievery things." Like, just... and here's the thing, that was in like a third chapter. We didn't know that the party knew he was a thief until that travel banter, which was optional. We didn't even know a basic thing about these characters. Like, oh my god. Okay, sorry, I'm just trying to find another question, because this is a discussion stream. Okay, Aquasun says, were there any interesting world building details that stuck out to you about the setting? A lot of it that intrigued me the most had to do with kind of the spoilery stuff, the kind of underlying mystery beneath most of the plots. I say most of them because some of them are very weakly connected, like Tressa's is like very thinly connected to it, while like Cyrus's is almost directly looking into that mystery, you know. I do also like the kind of like war. They had like a war in the past and they set that up really well. The way that like the towns work, like their economies and shops and stuff, and how merchants are treated, and like how certain types of people are treated, like the dancers, like Primrose, are like, oh, they're here for like dancing and like, oh, making cool. And like the game mechanics actually play into that, where each party member has like a pair, like Ophelia and Primrose are a pair, where they have path actions. Ophelia is the good version, where if she guides someone, like they come with you and there's no downside. But if Primrose tries to allure someone and she fails, you can get a bad reputation. So like there's world building there, which was really neat, and I liked that it was a gameplay thing too. Though on the other hand, it's like, why would you not do the good version? Like, I barely did Scrutinize because I always just did the talk or gossip with Alf or whatever, because there was no downside to it. But yeah, yeah, Therion's definitely really, really by far the most affected by that choice to not have the party acknowledged in the stories. There were a few other times in other stories, like Cyrus gets knocked out at one point by one person, and I did a comic on that, which was like, how? Like, I had 5 other people with him, like, how did he get knocked out? Like, come on. But yeah, Therion's definitely, like, by far was the most affected by that. Which, for the other small instances, you could kind of, like, overlook it, but his entire thing was being a lone wolf, which when you have 7 other people with you constantly, it's not great. And then the last one in terms of the boys, which I still liked and is above Tressa's, was Olberic's. His was another standard revenge story, but still very enjoyable. I liked the like history that was brought into it, and Olberic's like honorable older character was really interesting too. But I think the thing that bogged it down the most was that out of all of them, his was kind of the most soap opera-y in the monologues, and like he would talk to himself about his revenge for Earhart for like a long time. Like, and I'd just be like, checking my watch that I don't have. Like, come on, buddy. One of the early comics I did, as you can see the panel here, was literally the little boy Philip, like, walking in on his monologue and being like, "Are you done yet? Like, come on." But as I mentioned, it is still better. I'm sorry, Tressa, but it is still better than Tressa's for me by quite a bit. Because, yeah. Funnily enough, if Tressa did have, like, if hers focused on someone kind of being like, hey, you're kind of making, like, rash decisions here, and maybe you should think about that, or, like, if there was some sort of consequence to these things, like ruining an economy, then I feel like hers actually would have been above Olberic's, possibly even Therion's, but that's not how it went. So Tressa's is lowest, Olberic's above, and then I'm not sure how everybody else, and then Alpha at the top. Okay. So that was the individual stories. Gaku asks, who had your favorite outfit? Do you mean, like, general outfit, or also, like, job outfits? Because I don't know the job ones off the top of my head. I think general outfit for girls would be Primrose. It's just really pretty, and it's also, like, it's fan servicey, but, like, in a tasteful way, if that makes any sense. Basically, what I'm looking for in those types of outfits is, does it look at least kind of comfortable to wear? And it's like, yes, if there's, like, a rubber string or something that's holding that bottom part together, and then, like, the belt of the thing is nice, sure. And then for guys, I actually really like Cyrus's, because it's, like, fancy. Oh man, divine skill, I don't know. I think the other thing I was gonna end off on... guess I'll mention this first. The first thing I was going to go over before going individually into the stories was that, related to the stories being individual the entire game, when I first played it, I was convinced that you had to do all of the first chapters for each character, like, each one, and, like, before you could do any second ones. I thought the second ones were locked, so that it would guarantee you had the full party, and then that way the second chapters were going to use more of the characters, and, like, the third chapters more, and then the fourth all of them. That's not how that worked. And I was baffled, because I swore that's what they were going to do. You know? Because coding-wise, like, I've done some coding in the past, and I really liked it, like, did some games and stuff. That would not be hard. And in fact, they did it in the game proper. The way that you have to unlock the final dungeon requires you to hit a few flags. So, like, they very much could have done that, and, like, as far as I know, it probably could have been as easy as a true-false flag to have all the first chapters done. Like, you have to do those, and then the second ones unlock. You know what I mean? Like, you can't do any second ones until you have everyone. Because what that would do is guarantee that those people are there, and then you could use them in the second chapters. The first chapters having only those characters totally makes sense, because you could start with whoever you want, and, like, absolutely viable. But, like, imagine if the second chapters had, like, their opposites. Like, Ophelia had Primrose, Alf had Cyrus, you know what I mean? And, like, they just led into it slowly, right? Like, how cool would that have been? But that's not what happened. And then I do like the system of picking and choosing which members you have in the party in the tavern. But as Adept mentioned, I would have loved a Tales-esque system where everyone is there. It's just only some are fighting. And you could even just do the same thing as the tavern, but just have it be like, we can only carry so many weapons, so we have to, like, store them at the tavern. So who's going to fight, who's going to carry the items, and have it like that, you know? So, like, you still had to go back to the town if you wanted to have someone else fighting because their quote-unquote weapons were there, but they could still be there for travel banter and story stuff, you know? And then you could have had the travel banter the whole way through. Heck, if they did it that way and every single travel banter happened, I almost wonder if I would have had the issue of, you know, the lack of interactivity, because then all the travel banter would have been there. But it wasn't. But overall, it's extremely good game. Good music, good gameplay. This isn't the end. I just have this here for some reason. But yeah, and then I guess one other tiny thing is that I love the art style, but my gosh, trying to get like references of random NPCs is a nightmare because they're only these tiny little pixel art things, and I'm like, do you have glasses? I guess the next thing I will go over is my thoughts on the battle system. I really liked the battle system, because you have to break the enemies with their weaknesses, and then they can't attack for a turn or two, and then they take extra damage, which is really awesome. You can also, like, if they're powering up a strong move, you can break them before they get to it, and then they can't do it. It's amazing. I do wish there was a way to tell which weapons you've tried that didn't involve memory, but I do understand why they couldn't really do that. But I don't know. I'm not going to remember what I've tried already. the amount of times that I was like, did I use spear? Poke. Oh, I used spear already. Did I use spear? Poke. Oh, I used spear already. Like, I just kept forgetting. Which again, I don't really blame them for that. It's just a me thing. But the system is complex enough that after a long pause, I do need to remind myself of the workings, but it doesn't take too long to come back to it. And there are parts of the system I didn't use as often, but that's not because they're bad. It's just I tended to like other strategies, like, say, status effects. I just don't use those in any games. Like, it's not that they're bad. In fact, they were probably good. It's just I don't use those, or like I forgot about them because there's so many options. Some dude with sandals asks, I don't know if you answered this earlier, but what was your favorite story boss? That was the dragon from Haanit. I liked all the story bosses. I'm trying not to be too spoilery. But I had some great moments with that one. Like a clutch moment where I almost died, but I had his sidesteps already queued up, and I got out of the way and got Ophelia back. It was amazing. Speaking of boss battles, the boss battles deserve extra praise. They're quite challenging, but not so much that you're constantly losing or anything, at least for me. If you get to the levels that they recommend, it's going to be challenging, but it's like a fair challenge, which is really appreciated, you know? So I really liked that like you would have tense moments, but you could still do it. Absolutely. And like if you're doing side quests and stuff, you're gonna be fine. One gripe though, and this is just a general thing, but I really don't like random encounters. I get it, in terms of coding and stuff, and you can lower them with the skills. My biggest thing is actually just the fact that it tends to make me get lost in the dungeons more than I otherwise would. Because in something with like Tales or Paper Mario where the enemies are on the screen and then you run into them, I can kind of like prepare myself and be like, okay, there's an enemy right there, take a snapshot of where you are, and then go into the battle, and now you're going to remember when you get out of it. But I think that was also helped by, in those games, I think they had a bit better dungeon design. Like, I'm sad to say, the dungeons are beautiful, just like everywhere else, but I found that they weren't really interesting, and they were kind of hard to navigate. Like, I kept getting lost in them, because, I don't know, they just kind of lacked some landmarks, so the pathways were kind of weird, and a lot of them were dark, which, like, it looked beautiful, but I was just kind of like, where am I going? And then I'd get into a battle, and I'd be like, which way was I going? You know? And then there's always a Therion purple chest, which is like, oh, if you don't have them in the party, you have to go back, and then... Aquasan asks, are you going to play more of the games from Square Enix that have this kind of art style, triangle strategy, or the recently announced Live? Or Bravely Default, perhaps, asks Monkey Lufico. I'm not sure. I know I was definitely interested in triangle strategy, but it would definitely be further down on my list right now. It'd take a while to get there. And then Bravely Default has been, like, on my list too, but I don't know if it'd be soon, especially because, like, I didn't finish, like, Octopath wasn't too long ago, so I'm kind of, like, a little worn out on that type right now, so. And I think I'm playing 3 Houses right now, so I'm getting a lot of that, like, war gameplay. So, obviously it's different, but the feel, if that makes any sense. General story stuff, which I did a lot of that. I'm just gonna skim this to make sure I'm not, like, repeating too much. I already talked about that. Accents. Oh, yeah, the voice thing. One thing I forgot to mention is that sometimes there will be a scene that me and my roommate were sure is going to be voiced, and we're just, like, sitting there, and it's not. Like, there will be these really important scenes, and, like, other scenes near to it were voiced, and then all of a sudden it's just not voiced anymore, and we're like, why? Or, like, sometimes one line is, and then the rest isn't, and we're just waiting, and we're like, what? Well, but I actually got through most of the story stuff before with the individual ones, so there we go. Oh, there's a dungeon picture. I didn't pull it up, but so this is the one thing I'm gonna try to be a little vague, but it is like the last dungeon, so I can only be so vague. This is the last thing I will be talking about, so if you don't want to hear anything about this, it's mostly just me ranting about the mechanics of it. Again, story-wise, I'm not going to say any specifics, so you can take that or leave it, but I don't want to spoil anybody. But I have a lot to say about this last dungeon, so I'm going to get into that. So there is a dungeon at the end of the game where you have to do this, like, side quest line to open it, first of all, and you have to do all the stories, because, as I mentioned earlier, I think all of the stories have these, like, loose ends and background information that is touched upon in this last dungeon. So that's why you have to finish all of them, and then you kind of unlocked this last one, okay? And I really like the idea of getting information about all these other stories and tying them together. Oh, see you later, Monkey D! I'm glad to see you here. But yeah, I like that idea of stitching everything together and tying them all up in a nice, neat little bow. But I mentioned it earlier, having it be giant journals of text instead of, like every single one of them is like, a little blah. And then the characters didn't comment on any of this. None of it. And some of it was, like, directly related to one person's story, and I'm being vague here to avoid spoilers, was like they wanted to meet this person, and then this person has one of these journals, and it, like, reveals everything about them, and they don't say anything. They're like, yeah, it is a big lore dump at the end, and like, I like that idea, I do, but it, like, the execution, it was just not good. And I mentioned earlier that a lot of people refer to this as a bonus dungeon. If it ties all the stories together and deals with loose ends, some of which are big loose ends, like Cyrus's whole thing is kind of like investigating this mystery. Can you really call that bonus? Like that's the finishing bow. And I know you have to, like, do these quote-unquote side quests to open it and such, but I just feel like calling that bonus does not feel right when it has that much information that ties everything together. Like, some dude with sandals asks, this is a bit of an odd question, but did you encounter any glitches while playing? Because the last time I played, I got a weird glitch in Therion's Chapter 4 where the camera would jump off to I had never seen that. Oh, I've never seen that before. Not really, to be honest, Pikachu says, but damn, does the difficulty spike through the... Yeah, I'm getting there. I'm getting there. Oh, I will get there. I agree. But yeah, the next thing about this bonus... Okay, well, last dungeon... I don't even know if I call it a dungeon, because it's a boss, quote-unquote, rush. With no way of identifying which boss you're going to face next, which, if you know anything about the battle system, you know the weaknesses and stuff, and, like, you know, like, it's one thing when it is the last boss of a chapter, because you're at least going to have one weakness. Like, they're nice enough to give you one weakness that the main character that's doing that chapter has. You know, like with Cyrus, it would be staff, fire, electric, or ice would be one of them. They're usually nice enough that they give that to you, so like if you were just doing it with him for some reason, you could still break it. But you get in there, there's 8 things to do the bosses. You go up to it and you say, there's a force here, do you want to fight it? And then you go into the battle. You don't know what boss is there. You just don't know. Like, and how are you supposed to prepare for that? And like, sure, you can go and fight it and whatever, but then yet you recuperate. And I called it a boss rush with quotes before, because you're not doing them right after another. And some people might be like, wait, no, yeah, you're doing it right after another, but no, you're not. You go up to the thing, you fight it, and when you finish fighting it, you're in the overworld again. You can walk around again. You can use your items to heal yourselves up. You can use your arts to heal yourselves up. You can rearrange your party. That's not a rush. Because to me, a boss rush, the challenge there is that... Didn't even know the bosses are randomized. I thought you were able to just choose. You technically are. They have technical positions, but if you're not looking that up, you have no idea what bosses are there, because it doesn't tell you anything. You can look up this last dungeon Octopath and like be like, where's which one? But that's outside knowledge. If you're just in the game, if you're just casually walking through this, all it says is, there's a presence here, do you want to fight it? There's nothing else you can do. But yeah, I wouldn't call this a rush, because the difficulty with boss rushes to me is that you have to manage your resources and manage your health and like your magic and such, because you don't have a chance to recuperate. The challenge is that you can't like heal yourself and get your MP back with a break. You just have to go right into the next one. You know, like if you fought a boss and you're like, oh man, I'm down half my MP, the next one comes at you. You don't have a chance to get your MP back. But in this you do. You can fully heal yourself. And like if you're playing the game even casually, you're not gonna have a problem with like they hand you items all the time. So like if you just have enough MP items, you just heal with like Ophelia or something, and then give her MP, and that's it. Like there's not much resource management there. Oh. And then for a game that has been so fantastic in most aspects, especially the battles, to have the final boss, because you have the 8 bosses before the final boss that has 2 phases, which you have to make 2 parties for, and you don't know anything about this final boss. And the difficulty spike between those 8 boss rush battles and the final boss is, for lack of a better word, cruel. Because if you can fight those 8 bosses with like a decent challenge, that final boss is going to cream you. So if you're at a good level to fight the final boss fairly, those 8 bosses before it are chumps, and they just waste your time. Even if those bosses each took 1 minute, and then you just had the stuff in between or reading the lores, that is 10 minutes. Especially if you die to that last boss, you have to do all 8 of those over again. So again, even if those are only taking you 8 minutes and you're just like walking in between them and you have to activate the lore dump so that it'll open the way to the final boss, so that's a few seconds right there, so just say round up to 10 minutes, that's 10 minutes before you can try that last boss again. There is no reason for that difficulty spike between those two. It should have been that you fight the 8, you open up to the last one, and you can save there. That would have taken away like half of my complaints with this last thing. Because, again, if you can fight the last one with a fair chance of winning, like the final boss that has 2 phases, The 8 bosses before it are just time wasters. They just waste your time. And I don't want to spend a minimum of 10 minutes fighting these chumps, which is usually honestly more like 20 minutes, because I was at I'm not that good at the system. That doesn't sound like a difficulty spec, that just sounds like padding for... Exactly. Well, that's the thing, is that I didn't get to that yet. The final boss is far more difficult and with more health than anything else in the game. I mentioned it before, I did all the side quests. I got bonus jobs, which means that you fight super bosses. I fought some of the other super bosses. I fought all the other bosses. I died maybe once or twice in the entire 100 hours of the game, and then that final boss killed me 4 or 5 times. After having to fight those 8 ones that were easy. I never died to those 8 ones. And if you guys don't know anything about that last boss, I will tell you. Something about the way that it's designed, this final dungeon, it feels like they're trying to make sure that you die at least once. Which, if that is the case, that's at least 16 bosses you have to fight. Again, you have to make 2 parties for the 2 phases of the final boss that you have no idea what this thing is about. With in-game knowledge, you don't know what's coming up. You don't know its weaknesses. You don't know its physical defense. You don't know anything. You're just supposed to go with it. And some people played the game not evenly leveling up people. So they have to use some of the people that they haven't been leveling. Oh, they are screwed. So in the first phase of the final boss, there's a gimmick where you have to kill little guys before you can attack the main one, which is fine. Having the gimmick where those guys respawn is even fine. Having a gimmick where they have to die first, respawn, and they have to be killed all at the same time when you can't see their health bars is awful. Just awful. Oh, some dude with sandals asks, I have to go, so one more question for me. Did you have a favorite design out of the 4 extra job class bosses? The bosses? Ooh, I don't quite remember what all those bosses looked like. I only fought them once each. I'm gonna say the warlock guy. He was cool. But getting back to the life bars, Octopath is a game where you can see the number, the amount of health they have left. And for the most part, that's not really an issue, not being able to see it. It's a little bit annoying sometimes, but because you can use a move, it's called, Analyze. And that's how you see the number of HP. And you have a little tell in their names. If their name is white, the text, they are at 100% to 51% HP. If they're at yellow, it's 50% to 26 HP. Red is 25% or less. The things that respawn that you have to kill all at the same time that you can't see the life bars for have 50,000 HP each, which means that when you get to the red name, that is somewhere within 12,500 HP. And they have good enough defense and such that trying to get that all lined up and breaking them, because breaking them is when you get the big damage. And, I am not the pro strat gamer, admittedly, but I'm just talking about a casual playthrough here. Casual playthrough, trying to do 12,500 HP on every single one of those guys, which all have different break resistances and all have different physical and magical defense, by the way, is hard. And when you kill one and it respawns, it gets its entire pool of HP back. So trying to whittle all of them down, even when you have AoE, like the Cyrus's fire and lightning and ice, or Haanit's arrow move, any AoE one, they have different resistances for all of those. So you can't even spam AoE attacks hoping to, whittle them down evenly. It'll all be different. And then if if you have one that dies and respawns and gets all its HP back, now you ruined your your setup, because now you got other guys that are like in red or yellow, and then this one's back at white, so you have to individually attack him, but you have to break the other one so that they're not beating on you, but breaking on them means you have to attack them, which means you inevitably might kill them again and then get them to respawn. Greased Lightning asks, is this required for the best ending? No, that's the worst part. You get almost nothing. When you beat the thing, you get a tiny cutscene that's not voiced, that has 5 lines of dialogue, and not a single one of your party members reacts to anything. It's just people being like, oh, thank you, you've saved us from this thing. Now the world is safe. And that's it. Oh, and I think somebody said you get a little crown on your profile. Woo! Oh, can you tell I'm bitter? I beat it, but it's not worth it. If you're thinking, okay, by all means, I recommend Octopath. Absolutely. But once you beat the 4 main chapters and the side path, it's like side stories and side quests and everything, like you finish everything, and the only thing you have left is the final dungeon that ties up all the stories and stuff, go watch a video. If you need to read all that text block, pause it. Because I think the lore is really interesting and worth seeing, but it is just not worth it to fight that thing. It's way better to just go watch a video. Or cheese it. Yep, people have said cheese it. Like, if you could find a way to cheese, just cheese. It's not worth it. Because, like, even... Okay, let's say I fight it and stuff. Like I said, you get, like, 5 lines of dialogue. What kind of reward is that? Like, even if it hadn't been hard, I still would have been like, really? Like, okay. Like, I guess you could say the lore is a good reward, quote unquote, if it had been, first time, beating it on the first time and no problems. But you get the lore from the 8 guys before that, not the final 2-phase boss. So, like, the final 2-phase boss doesn't even give you anything other than a little crown on your profile. Sorry, I try not to get so. I did not like it. Oh yeah. So those bonus jobs are very powerful, and they're pretty much needed to have a chance at fighting the final boss. The reason being is that I actually did try to fight it without the bonus ones, and the bonus jobs, I mean, and I got past the 8 bosses fine. And I was skilled enough to fight the final boss, which was proved because I arrived at a stalemate, where I was keeping myself alive quite well from all of its, like, it was doing damage, yeah, but it wasn't, like, killing me almost every turn. It was, like, every 5 turns or something, and I was keeping myself alive. The literal problem I had is that I wasn't doing enough damage. That's it. And, like, I was at the level I was at a higher level than recommended online. I just didn't have the bonus extra jobs, which is like, well, like, I just literally wasn't doing enough damage. And I'm like, come on, I should be able to do this without having the bonus extra jobs. Like, those are fun, but, like, I should be able to do this. But even with them, it still was a pain because of the respawning thing. That was literally, like, that was the biggest thing that was just sucky. Because once I got to the second phase, I did die on the second phase one time, but that was because, if you saw my comic, I forgot to give somebody a class that I needed so that they could heal. So I wasn't able to heal, and that's why I died. But that was the most despair I've ever felt. I literally was like, I put down my controller, and my roomie was like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "You just started. Like, come on, do your first turn." And I went, "Look at Haanit. And she did. And Haanit didn't have her cleric robe on. And we both just sat there like, oh my god. But then we beat it when we had it set up. The second phase was one shot when done correctly. with no lack of cleric. The first phase was the one that killed like 5 times. And that's actually it. That's most of my gripes with that. Yeah, Gaku, I wish I could go back in time and just be like, watch a thing, it's not worth it. I'm gonna go to well, actually, does anybody have any other questions? Because this is a discussion stream, and I have enjoyed answering the questions. And I'll probably tuck away Octopath for a good while after this, so... Excuse me. Oh, sorry, I'm just looking at the image of the gate of Venice. And I'm just like, bad memories. Oh my gosh. While you guys are thinking of questions, the last boss does have good music, but here's the thing. I actually don't even like that song anymore, because now it's just associated with a BS boss. Like, just awful. Aqua-san says, what did you think of the name? Were there any Octopaths to travel? I actually really like the name Octopath Traveler. I think that's interesting. Like, it's very, like, it's very deliberate and, like, you know, it's very to the point. Octopath Traveler. 8 paths and travelers, like, you know, like, I think it's a good name. Triangle Strategy, on the other hand. I don't know how many of you guys heard, but a YouTuber called it Strangle Strategy, and I love that. Does Haanit is gay? I don't know. Oh, King of Carp. Oh, I answered your question, like, near the beginning. And it kind of took a while. Because I really went into your question. So. Oh man. I'm trying to think of how I can answer this, like, in a summary version. I will post it to YouTube, and the VOD will be on Twitch for a while. And I'm going to try to timestamp it, so I don't know if you want to do that. But I will try to summary. Let's see. So I did talk about a lot of people write it off because of lack of party interactivity, but no one seems to evaluate the quality of the stories themselves. So for me, I did like the 8 stories themselves. And I did go over them each individually. I think, oh god, again, I don't really have a rating for all 8 of them. Alf was definitely my favorite. Oh, I don't know the middle. Tressa's my least favorite. It's still good, don't get me wrong. It's just like, it had some issues that I really just couldn't overlook. I would say Olberic's is above Tressa's by a good chunk, but still kind of the bottom end, and then Therion above that, etc., etc. I won't go into all of it, but I will go into Therion's because it does relate to what you're talking about here, where people write it off because of the lack of party interactivity. I think it was interesting to have the 8 stories separately, but because of the gameplay and the presentation of the game itself and advertising all leaning into there being, in the title even, Octopath Traveler, 8 people, it hurts the stories because, like, it almost feels like false advertising. Like, so much of the imagery, like, if you look up Octopath Traveler, like, they're around the campfire all together, they're in a tavern all together, there's, like, these cute images of, like, 3 of the girls or something looking at a map, like they're always working together. And to not see that reflected in the stories themselves is, I think there's a trope called gameplay and story segregation, where it does not fit. And Therion's is the one I want to go into just right now, summarizing very quickly, because his story hurts, actively hurts, because he has 8 people walking around with him, but he keeps touting that he's a lone wolf. Like, there were a few other times in other stories where like that would happen, like Cyrus gets knocked out and you're like, why aren't the party helping him, or stuff like that, which like I could kind of gloss over that, but like Therion's was actively hurt by the fact that the party isn't interacting. And I don't think I directly alluded to this, but I might have a little bit, but I am always very strained when stories have like it lets the audience decide for themselves thing, because that can be done well, and like, it lets the audience write their own stories for the characters and stuff like that. But this is an instance where I feel like I'm like, okay, but also why did the writers not do their job? Like, it kind of sounds a little mean putting it that way, yes, but also like why was the travel banter optional? I know very little about their interactions, and like, sure, I'm imagining it, but why do I have to fill in the blanks? Okay, where did I leave off here? Oh, Aquasons. Be a 2000s era reviewer. What's your rating? Where do you put this on your ranking of RPGs? Ooh. What's my rating? 4.5 out of 5. Bye, Aqua. Did you like the 8 stories overall or nah? Oh, okay, I answered it. Doesn't help the tavern conversations imply they're traveling. Yeah. Deca Pikachu, yeah. 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 Like the tavern conversations and the travel banter, it implies that they're traveling together, and there's such a disconnect between the main stories and the travel banter. It feels like I'm playing 2 different games, and not in a good way. Okay, was there any other questions, or should we go to the end screen? But yes, I will try to timestamp the VOD. Really feel like if this game gets a spiritual successor, I feel like Triangle Strategy might be that. The lack of party interactivity is going to be the number one thing they'll fix. Team Asano really values player feedback, and that was people's biggest problem. Yeah, I definitely have no. Oh shoot, tree, did I miss it? Oh, there we go. Would you consider playing any of the other Team Asano games? The games for Heroes of Light? I've never heard of 4 Heroes of Light, but I did mention I was kind of interested in the Bravely Default games, but I have a very long list. So I don't know when I'd really get to that. I do know that Bravely Default has interesting music at the very least. I've definitely listened to that. Also, I looked up spoilers for that game long time ago, so I don't remember it. So if I can go in blind. Oh my god! Oh, you guys can't see it, but there was 3333. Oh, you guys didn't see it, but there was 33,333 drop frames, and I had 33 notifications. It was kind of funny. Unfortunately, it wasn't 33.3% of drop frames, but it was a bunch of 3s. But yeah, if I ever do play any more of those types of games, it would probably be a bit further into the future. I got a lot of that stuff that I'm looking at right now. No. It has a really bad difficulty spec later, though, where you're just dumped into the world and like 8 super hard bosses scattered all around the world. And I never got past that. Oh. Yeah. If there's ever like necessary grinding in games, that really loses me. Like I'm all for challenges, but when stuff just gets like hard for the sake of being hard. I'm like, I got other stuff to do. I don't got time for this. But yeah, it seems like that is about it. That was good. Nice stream, I'd say. Oh, I wish I could stream more. Only 21.2% of range dropped. That's not too bad for Wi-Fi. But here is the end screen. Ooh, if you type stuff, it should. Chatbox. Where are you? Chatbox. Chatbox, no! Why are you not showy? You should be there. Hello? Hello? No? No chatbox? Okay. Oh, that's gonna look weird to you guys. Because you're probably behind. Yeah, no, this is super fun. I wish I'd stream more. But also... Oh, there! Maybe it just doesn't show me. Okay. Yeah, no, I would like to stream more, but man, I can't do anything with like moving visuals until I get a better connection, because it just feels awful to be like, watch this awful buffered mess. You know? Oh. Like, I can't do that to you people. It's just too mean. It'd be like torture. So for now, it's just audio stuff. But one day I'll do more. But yeah, thank you guys for coming so much. I don't know exactly when I'll get this up on YouTube, but I will try to timestamp where like the general discussion points are. So if you missed some earlier, you can kind of like see the general like, oh, this is what she's talking about, right? So, but yeah, thank you guys so much for coming. That was actually really, really fun. I actually don't know what else should I even do for streams. I don't really have any other discussion things lined up. I can't think of much that would be only talking. Oh, God. Oh well. No, I'll try to think of something. I don't know. Bye-bye.